hand over to Timothy now. Please give him a great warm at Promotion Summit Christmas welcome to the virtual stage. Over to you, Timothy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the setup. And yes, good afternoon in Berlin and good morning from Canada, where I'm in my parents' basement isolating from COVID, which is always fun this time of year. Thank you for joining me. And I'm really excited today to kind of share this presentation I have on how kind of Blinkist adapted to the circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic by really leveraging a customer first mentality. Before I get into that, just to introduce myself, my name is Tim and I am the head of CRM at Blinkist. But really what I'm going to talk a lot about today is the work of these three lovely people on the right side of the screen, Simone, Wendy, and Mai. They are the CRM managers. They are badasses. And I'm really proud to be here today to show off a lot of the work they've done. Now, a lot of you might be, wondering, like, how deep am I going to get into the specific tactics of what Blinkist has done? And I don't really want to focus too much on that because obviously that's not really that applicable to all of you. Instead, what I really want to focus on is the process that we've developed as a company to really make sure that at any point in time, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's not, hoping there are no more pandemics, that we're able to understand our customers, kind of frame the situation they're in terms of customer problems, and taking those customer problems and using them in a collaborative way to really kind of supercharge both the kind of engagement and retention of our customers. Now, some of you might not be familiar, pardon me, of what Blinkist is, but Blinkist is basically an app service that you can purchase that kind of gives you bits of nonfiction knowledge in really digestible packets. So what we do is we have over 4,000 nonfiction books and also nonfiction podcasts that we've kind of combed through, and we've taken out the key insights to both of those pieces of fiction. And we've really packaged them up into 15-minute increments that you can use on the go, you can read, you can listen to them. And we have this vision as a company is helping people fit learning into their life. We recognize that, maybe outside of the pandemic, people are busy, they're kind of this on-the-go lifestyle. We really want to make sure that people can kind of continue that learning journey without stressing about, needing to read a full-time book or take a course, etc. Now, we have two kind of really primary groups of users that enjoy our product. The first of those is the career optimizer. So the career optimizer, they're really the people that want to climb the corporate ladder and are looking for any kind of edge that will help them do that. And, we really speak to that group because we have a lot of content in our app that's about things like leadership, that's about things like collaboration in the workforce. And these people are also supremely time crunched. They don't want to invest in a course. They don't want to invest in reading a full nonfiction book from someone like Simon Gladwell, or Malcolm Gladwell, I should say. And so what they do is they kind of use our app to kind of gain these mini insights to give themselves a leg up on their competition. That's the first group. The second group is the knowledge seeker. And the knowledge seeker is a little bit different in that they're really focused on both breadth and depth of content. So we have over 4,000 pieces of content, like I said, and these are people that are kind of combing through that content, looking to understand things like what's happening with their pandemics or how do they manage their finances better. And so we kind of serve that group by, once again, giving them those pieces of content. And what's interesting about both of these groups is they actually use the product in fairly similar ways. So kind of the left chart here, it shows a little bit of this kind of story of how, coming out of the weekend, people feel this kind of crest of motivation. You probably feel it every day in your own work. And so people start out really motivated and kind of decrease over time. But what's more interesting is kind of this chart on the right, which is the work commute. So we as a company were really heavily dependent on the work commute. As you can see here, in this morning kind of bump and in this evening bump, a lot of people had this kind of usage context of, okay, I'm sitting down in the subway or I'm getting into my car. It's time for me to get up Blinkist to, listen to these pieces of content before I start my day. And that's obviously a problem when this happened, because we had really framed a lot of what we have done as a company around the idea that we're helping people, navigate the workforce, we're helping people kind of use content during their commute, and all of a sudden the commute disappeared. So I couldn't include numbers just for confidentiality reasons on the left chart, but suffice it to say, engagement dropped significantly as soon as the pandemic started. But what was more interesting to us was that this kind of sharp peak we were seeing in the morning and evening, it was starting to be more smoothed out over the course of the day, because people were telling us that, yeah, I'm not waking up at the same time for my commute. My waking up time is different. I have a different routine in the morning. And so all of a sudden, Blinkist was kind of falling out of their kind of headspace, if you will. The next thing that we saw was, and we still don't really understand this, is that people were starting to use us more on the weekend. So kind of this initial behavior we saw from our users of kind of declining motivation over the week almost kind of developed this inverse curve where over the course of the week, people were becoming more motivated and more kind of interested in using our app, which is still something we don't fully understand, but we have theories of just kind of the similarities between working days and the weekend. And then from a KPI perspective, we saw something that was really alarming to us. And so we have a 7-day free trial with our product. So when you go to purchase a 1-year subscription, we give you 7 days for free to say, hey, you can try this product with no commitment. The only thing you have to do is give us your credit card details. And over the course of those 7 days, if you don't opt out of the free trial, we'll charge you at the end of the 7 days. If not, over those 7 days, at any point, you can also say, I want to opt out of this trial. You'll still have access for 7 days, but we won't be able to charge your credit card. And as soon as the pandemic started to really pick up, we noticed this worrying trend of a lot of people actually opting into the free trial, and on that same day, actually opting out of being charged at the end of the 7 days, which told us that a lot of people had this kind of financial concern that they didn't want to pay for Blinkist, they didn't think they could afford it in the current climate, and we were losing this opportunity to really prove the value of the product over that period of time, which was really scary for us. And then this was a fun one I included just for the sake of it. If you look on the left, we had the top search terms before Corona. On the right is the top search terms during Corona. Really weirdly, sex dropped from number 6 to number 10. But this is one of those pieces of insight that we didn't really want to ask our customers about too closely. And this kind of brings me to my first lesson, and I'll talk about a couple of these lessons over the course of the presentation. But my first is that the quantitative data you have on your side is really important for showing you what problem exists. So for us, we were seeing this issue of declining engagement rates around our core usage context that we had developed, but you can't really act on that stuff without having the qualitative part of it as well. Like you need to go out to your customers and be able to have their insights as to why these KPIs are being negatively, or in some cases positively affected. And we are lucky as a company in that we had previously actually invested a little bit in a research team. And so as soon as the pandemic started, we went out and we started asking questions. So we asked questions like, how are you feeling? And people were telling us, I'm stressed, I'm depressed, I feel lonely. We were asking people, what kind of content is helping you cope? Because we are a content company, and we could tell that as people were starting to disengage from our content, they were probably going somewhere else and consume content elsewhere. And so people were telling us, yeah, like I go to BBC and CNN to kind of understand the news more of what's happening, or I'm going to Netflix, Disney Plus, YouTube for the kind of like guilty pleasure learning as well, which was a really important insight for us because we were learning from people that, maybe Blinkist is a bit too heavy-handed for the pandemic. The other thing we had was a fun question as well is, who do you want to hear from? And a lot of people talk to, wanting to hear from my man, Anthony Fauci, the dreamboat that he is. But hilariously, a lot of people also really wanted to hear from Oprah because, who else do you want to hear from in a pandemic than the respected voice of someone like Oprah? So we thought that was kind of funny. But what we really came to is we had a lot of different quotes from our users and a lot of really interesting insights. And I pulled out a couple here because, yeah, we had people saying, yeah, my commute is gone, but I also haven't established another routine. And that was really negative news for us as a company because we had previously kind of depended on this very uniform routine that all of our customers were taking. And that helped from a CRM and a product perspective to just say, yeah, we can kind of have this one size fits all, and that will address most of our target market because we know this is when they're using it, but that's not the case anymore. We were having people tell us, the pandemic is really stressing me out. I really can't think of something like learning and improving myself. I just want to de-stress, and learning is a bit too cerebral for me right now. But then the third one, which was really interesting to us that we started to take advantage of, was people talking about the new context with which they're using Blinkist. And I don't think it's a thing where, people were not using these contexts already, but I think, looking at kind of this chart here, it was something we didn't really pay attention to as much before because, we were so heavily dependent on the commute that we said, yeah, we recognize that people will use it while exercising, use it while cooking. But at the end of the day, if we know that the majority of our base is going to use it while commuting, why wouldn't we just target that? But all of a sudden we said, okay, we have to pay attention to a bit more of these contexts and leverage these contexts to help improve engagement rates. This also all led to what is my favorite image Blinkist has created because I just love the idea of someone saying, I need to use the toilet. Let me just slap on my headphones and listen to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. A very fun context, I suppose. From a CRM side, kind of our initial thing that we took from this was, okay, we have context, which is really important. So let's shift some of our communications away from our previously established context, which was the work commute, and let's talk about these new contexts, because that might resonate with some of our customers who maybe hadn't considered that they could listen to Blinkist while working out or before bed. And then the second thing that gave us was also content. We knew that people were thinking about things like their health because they had really readily accessible snacks to them. They were thinking about their finances because the recession was kind of coming into force. And so we were able to take kind of context and content to build relevancy. And obviously relevancy is the big thing you want to aim for as both your product and your CRM. So we built out a couple of those campaigns to really take advantage of that relevancy. But that wasn't the only step. I think what's in a really important step that a lot of companies then rather miss after they kind of have both the quantitative and the qualitative data is framing these things in customer problems. And this might be a term you're familiar with, this might be not, but the best way to describe it to you is to contrast it with KPIs. So KPIs are obviously business health metrics. Like, your business is doing well if you're, have a high trial retention rate for us, if you have a high engagement rate. These are things that we use as measurements to know that things are going well for us or when things are going poorly. The problem with this is if you focus too much on the KPIs, as a lot of the companies I previously worked for have, then you kind of lose out on this context of understanding why the KPIs are going down. So you don't know why the engagement rate is falling, but if you kind of look at it in terms of customer problems and through your kind of data and your qualitative research, you'll find out, okay, engagement's going down because people aren't being reminded to use the app, or people are having trouble discovering content that's relevant to them. And so what you need to do is you need to take kind of the insights you have and frame them into problems, because that gives you kind of initiatives that you can prioritize and focus on to really start impacting your KPIs in a really positive way. And to give you a couple examples, the first one we really focused on was trial anxiety. So this is something that Wendy worked on, one of our CRM managers, which she was really passionate about, was this idea that we were hearing from customers that I don't want to give my credit card details to access your free trial because I'm really fundamentally worried that you're going to charge me at the end of the 7 days. I'm going to forget that you charged me, and all of a sudden I'm going to have €100 charge on my credit card that at this point in time I can't really afford. And so Wendy went and found a really simple solution to this customer problem of anxiety, something that the customers were referencing quite a bit. And she just said, why not just have people have the option to opt into a reminder on the 5th day of their trial? And so that's what we did. We created an in-app message that basically said, if you want to make sure that there's no anxiety for starting your trial, opt in here. And it had the very positive effect for us of increasing our iOS push opt-in rate from 6% to 75%, a dream come true for CRM. But what it also led to, which we weren't really expecting, was a 4% increase in trial retention rate. And when we looked at kind of the data and what we figured out is because we removed this anxiety, we were having a lot more customers actually opt into the trial. So we were increasing our base of people that were opting in, which kind of negated the fact that we had these people on day 5 that were being reminded they were in a trial who were opting out. So it was a really positive story for us that kind of emerged from us focusing on a customer problem we wanted to solve. The second one, which our CRM manager Simone worked on, which I think was a really cool solution that she put in place, was kind of this idea of people saying, I don't have enough reminders to actually use your product. Because people were telling us that, again, without the work commute, they were lacking this kind of trigger that made them think, oh yeah, I should probably be using Blinkist because I have that subscription. So what she designed was kind of like a checking in challenge. And the idea behind it was, a very simple message to customers of just come in, check through the app every single day for the next 7 days, and at the end of it, you might get a reward. And if you look on the graph, we saw really positive results from this in terms of, yeah, of course, we had people that from the first to the second day maybe decided this isn't for me, I don't want to really do this. But you can see that kind of cresting line graph there shows that a lot of people resonated with this and said, yeah, I can actually use this as a starting point to build a habitual usage of Blinkist, which is something we really wanted to encourage with our customers. And so this is kind of my second point for the presentation, which is, don't focus too much on KPIs. Use KPIs as the business health metrics they are. Make sure you keep an eye on them. Make sure you know what your KPIs are, obviously, that's very important. But when it comes time to actually develop initiatives and frame initiatives and prioritize them versus other things you can do as a company, look at your customer problems. Because ultimately, if you solve your customer problems like we've been doing, we find that they inevitably impact your KPIs in a very positive way. That being said, I wanted to share kind of like a cautionary tale, which kind of brings me into the next part of the presentation about how you should kind of approach customer problems at the organizational level. Because a lot of the companies I've worked for, they don't really have this very strong relationship between marketing and product, which I think for an app is really, really vital and important. And we ran into this at the beginning of the pandemic because, as you might have seen, a lot of companies were kind of doing this goodwill gesture of, okay, the pandemic's awful, we want to help you through it. Here's 30 days free access to Calm or Headspace or any of these other apps. A lot of these companies did it, and we as a company thought, yeah, this would be a great idea as well. The problem was we looked at it through two very different silos. So on one side, we had the product team who looked at it, and they said, you know what, we have basic users that aren't paying for our app that are only able to access one piece of free content a day. What if we gave them access to a free reading list, and would all be pieces of content that are related to the pandemic? And the product side of the company said, yeah, that's a fantastic idea, we'll go and do that. And they took all the people that are listed there, they crunched for a couple days, and they very happily announced on a Friday, good news, everyone, we wanted to do this great thing for our customers. Here is a free reading list of 15 pieces of content for our customers. And this became quite awkward because on the marketing side of the company, the CRM team had actually been working on something entirely different, where we said, hey, we've got 15 million basic users. Why not just give all of them free access for 30 days? And so we took a much smaller group of individuals and actually made this happen. And the problem was that obviously then the stuff on the product side was kind of wasted effort. And so this is a really important lesson we learned, which is you really need to make sure that you're talking together as a company and you're kind of aligned towards a single mission. And for us, that's where mission teams came in. And so what is a mission team? If you haven't heard this term before, a mission team is basically a group of people that are shaped to fulfill a specific goal or purpose. And they're not aimed towards a KPI, that's very important. They're instead aimed towards an hypothesis or a set of ideas or customer problems they want to solve. And so with Blinkist, mission teams started on the product side of the company, and they're listed here, web growth, discovery. These are things like making sure we have more users convert through the web instead of through the apps to avoid some of the Apple payments, and also discovery of content. And I include the food emojis because to make things simpler for everyone within the company, all of the mission teams just refer to themselves by their food name. So cookie, ramen, dumpling, taco, kurtuffel. That's the only weird one. I don't understand why it's potato. And so how does CRM kind of fit into this is we also made the kind of commitment to join the mission teams. And so we made this decision back in 2019, but this wasn't something we really prioritized until the pandemic started, because we were feeling this tension of like, okay, we've said in the past we want to join these mission teams, but we're still having this conflict of marketing going off and doing something that's at odds with what product is doing or vice versa. And in a situation where you really need to optimize your resources, that's not good. And so what we instead decided was that the CRM managers who chose to represent themselves by animals, so cheetah, llama, elephant, would join the mission teams and act as a support base for those mission teams to ensure that these four things kind of happened. One, that we were speaking a common language. So, the CRM team learned a lot from the product team in terms of actually adopting this mentality of customer problems. Number two is opening up more channels as possible solutions for both groups. So, we used to think of things on the CRM side as we want to help people discover content. Well, that has to be a CRM solution. Or on the product side, they would think of it, well, that has to happen within the app. Now things could cross over a lot more, and we could say, well, people are having problems discovering content. Well, we can solve that with an email, or we can solve that in an app, or we can do both concurrently. And that's really to the benefit of the customer. The number three was resource efficiency. So you would have these situations where, the product teams and mission teams would be working on something within the app, and they'd say, we're full on developing this features for the app, so we can't really support anything else right now. And a CRM manager can step in and say, well, I can be a resource for you, and I can provide you kind of with support or insights or my channels to actually help solve other customer problems you're thinking of looking at, which I think is also a really positive thing for the company. And then number four, which is fairly intuitive, is this idea of just a consistent experience. So previously we'd send an email, it would have completely different content than what people would see in the app. Now with kind of this mission team setup and CRM joining the mission teams, we can make sure that everything was consistent for customers, which was really positive. And this kind of brings me to my next lesson, because I don't know how things are set up in your companies, but what I've really found is that by having this kind of setup of CRM kind of bridging the gap between product and marketing, it's been a really positive change for the company, because previously, I think there was this notion that marketing really predominantly focused on proceeds and product predominantly focused on just the customer experience. But now with kind of CRM kind of crossing a bit more, you can kind of bring this perspective to both groups, that of course proceeds are important, but also the customer experience is really important as well. And so it's something that I would encourage you, if you haven't already done, to kind of explore how you can get your product and marketing teams talking more concretely through CRM, which I think is great. And for us, it led to a lot of really cool solutions as well. So, we had previously had this customer problem of, our users telling us, hey, I'm using your app, but I don't really feel like I'm learning anything. Every day I come in, I read a 15-minute book summary, but then after I kind of forget what I learned. I don't really feel like I'm growing as an individual. And that's something that's alarming to us, because that's kind of at the core of our value proposition, this promise that you can use the app to fit learning into your life. And so Simone and the mission team Dumpling, which is more focused on kind of like learning management, they've worked together a lot over the course of the year, and they've developed some really cool solutions. And it would be things like, okay, how can we package together content and promote it through CRM in such a way that someone views, okay, I'm actually progressing through, idea of changing my career or boosting my productivity or being more mindful as an individual. Or we would also do things like, okay, what's a really simple way to reinforce what someone has done over the course of a month? Well, why not just tell them? And so Simone developed a really cool communication, which was just, your month in a blink. So the number of learning days you had, completed blinks, started blinks. And this idea was to generate this feedback. So again, the people felt like they were actually taking away something from the app, and they were actually feeling the value of the app that we kind of initially promised them to begin with. Another one, which was really cool, was bedtime. So as I kind of showed you in those graphs before, as we had this kind of change away from the commute and we were seeing engagements in other times, a lot of users were telling us, yeah, I'm more engaged in the evening, and I have this new context for Blinkist where I'm using it to fall asleep to. And I don't know how positive it is to fall asleep to your content. I guess it is what it is. It also developed into go to bed with Blinkist, which is one of my favorite taglines we've ever developed. But what was really cool is we said, okay, we can take this context, we can take this feedback, and kind of work together across product and CRM to address this new context. One, on the product side, by introducing the sleep timer, so that people, when they actually went to bed, they could say, okay, I want the app to shut off after 30 minutes. And then using CRM to kind of shift the engagement and behavior of our users towards using that sleep timer, because we can obviously play with communication times. And so we would send out push notifications, or we would send out emails that kind of timed things so that people were starting to take advantage of this feature, which you can see was very successful for us here. And that kind of takes me to my next lesson, which I think is, again, something that should be rather obvious, but I don't see enough from companies, which is on the CRM side and on the product side, always produce solutions that reduce the amount of time or the amount of work that users need to do to enjoy your product. And for us on the CRM side, one of the easiest things we did was we actually developed more of an email schedule for users. Because again, we had two core customer problems, taking everything back to customer problems, which was, I don't know what content I should discover in your app. I don't know what's relevant to me. I don't know what other people are enjoying. We heard all of these issues. And the second was, I don't feel like I'm prompted enough to use your service. So, I'll go days at a time without hearing from you. I need those external triggers, that external activation to actually use your product. So we laid out a really great weekly schedule that Simone, Mai, and Wendy worked on, where Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday all had specific themes to them, so they could speak to different parts of our customer base. We had that career optimizer that was still in mind, and we had those knowledge seekers as well. And then we could fill in the gaps through those other days, but we kind of created this implicit promise with our customer base that, yeah, we'll do more to help you discover content, and we'll do more to kind of remind you to use the app, which I think was really positive. And the other thing we did was, you saw those kind of peaks that we used to have in our work commute. And those were partly because we had communications that were always set to go during those commutes. So, we toyed with sending our push notification either in the morning, we toyed with having it in the evening, but always we timed it in such a way in that we thought it was optimal kind of to the masses. We kind of looked at, again, this homogeneous group of users that were doing the work commute, and we said, okay, we'll program the timing of the daily pick to just work for everyone. And what we realized, again, this customer problem through the pandemic was, well, that doesn't really work for users anymore, because again, their usage pattern and their routine has changed. And so we kind of have to adapt with that as well. And so this was something that both Mai and kind of Simone worked on, which was just giving people the ability to kind of simplify their kind of experience by choosing when they wanted their reminder. So, if you tell us, I use Blinkist at 12 p.m. when I come to cook in the kitchen, great. Now you can actually set that within the app, and we made that a much more frictionless experience for our users, which I think was really positive. Now, there are two last lessons that I'll leave you with here, because I couldn't figure out how they would fit through the flow of the conversation, but I think they're really important as well to keep in mind. And this was this fantastic quote from one of our users, because we were going out to our user base and we were basically asking them, what do you want to see from us? What changes do you need? How can we make things easier for you and simplify the experience? And a lot of our users were saying, don't change too much. We really love the core value proposition of your product. And so don't stray too far out of that. And as Blinkist, we kind of lost sight of that a little bit, because this year we introduced audiobooks into our platform. We tried a lot of different content formats. Some were shorter, some were longer than the 15 minutes we previously had. Some were more conversational, some were more like biographies. But really what I would encourage everyone to do is just focus on your value proposition. Focus on what brought these customers to your app in the first place, and don't try to kind of chase after the newest, sexiest thing, or kind of do a knee-jerk reaction to the pandemic to try something new, because ultimately you'll then hurt the relationship you have with your core customer base. And those people are the people that will stay with you through the pandemic. And so you have to make sure that group is protected. And if you do try to make inroads with kind of different customer groups or try out different things, make sure you do things in a very pragmatic, kind of like measured and kind of one step at a time way. The last thing is get shit done. So a lot of what I talked about were situations in which we were fairly lucky as a company. We had a good understanding of what our KPIs were. We had kind of this feedback loop of data, so we could see immediately the change in behavior of our users. We had built up a research team who went out and were looking kind of for these insights. And so, we had all these processes in place. What I would encourage you, if you don't have these processes in place, the next time there's a big upheaval or the next pandemic that rolls around, just focus on getting shit done. And by that, I mean, if you don't have data, if you don't have clear processes, don't stress too much on that and don't waste time establishing those things. Instead, focusing on testing and learning. We have this really great credo at Blinkist about, test and learn, test and learn, test and learn. And the idea behind it is, if you don't have a data set, create a data set. Release a campaign, see how customers respond, iterate from that campaign and move forward. And so I really encourage you, if you're in a situation where you don't have resources, just start trying things. Just start working and developing campaigns and see how people respond to that. And that's really my presentation. These were kind of the points I covered. It's really fun for me to be able to do this once again, to show off kind of the work CRM did over the course of the pandemic and share some of the learnings with you. It's also great because I'm actually leaving Blinkist at the end of this month. And so this is a really nice reflection as me as well to kind of check out on Blinkist. And with that, I will ask if there are any questions.